Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Father and Son podcast. My name is Liam Fawnin, and across from the table,
I am Mike Fawnin, Liam's dad.
and like I said, we are the Father and Son podcast. Welcome in. This is our first episode.
Inaugural.
First recording. So hopefully we don't sound weird or anything like that. But yeah. We were just going to start out with some intros, but first, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good myself. Just living it up in California.
I noticed the shirt. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
definitely representing there.
Oh yeah, wearing my California shirt. Not really. It's got lemons on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Lemons out of lemonade out of lemons, something like that.
Yeah. Lemonade stand. Summertime lemonade stand. It's summertime now.
So who the heck are you, and why are we doing this?
Well, I'm Liam.
Nice.
And for all of those of you who are interested, I am a recent college graduate, and I'm currently living with you guys on your property in a guest house, a separate house, and with my girlfriend of 2.5 years. Her name is Jill. And I grew up in Southern California playing sports. Some of those sports were hockey and lacrosse. And I generally just have an interest in all of the above and watch a little bit of basketball and watch a lot of hockey, NFL, stuff like that.
We'll be talking about some of that in the future.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be talking about that. And what else? I like a wide range of music, from rap to alternative to rock to R&B. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to talk about some of that stuff. I also play video games. I very much enjoy video games, and I enjoy the topic of history. I just am a history buff, so yeah, that about sums me up.
Cool. Well, as I said earlier, I'm Mike. I'm Liam's dad. Originally from Albany, New York. Now living in East County, San Diego, as Liam referred to. We're on a ranch with horses, chickens, sheep, dogs, cats. I've been a drummer and a musician most of my life. Love football like Liam, hockey like Liam. I also love to garden. I've been married to my wife Lisa for almost 30 years. And looking forward to having some fun, sharing some of the things that we're interested in, some of our views of generational differences that we've come up across in our discussions, and some of the similarities as well as the differences, and hopefully getting some of your thoughts as well as we go through. And let us know what you think by liking and subscribing to the channel, and we'll try to put these podcasts out
On a weekly basis.
Yeah. So with that.
Yeah, so the only thing I was going to add is this podcast is kind of just meant as a way for us to have discussions, but also kind of have a little bit of fun as well. So we're going to try to talk about some serious things and kind of mix it up with some light things, and we'll definitely have episodes that are completely just for fun, where we do a bunch of fun segments. Like I know we're going to do talk about current topics, like what's going on around the internet in general. And then we're also going to have some sports segments, hopefully.
For sure.
Maybe some NFL stuff. And we'll eventually, maybe not super soon, but maybe eventually, if we get some viewers, we'll have some interviews with some people, very interesting people. And maybe eventually we'll get some people who are professionals in their field. Who knows? But other than that, just internet culture stuff we'll be talking about, and a wide array of other stuff. And
musician friends of mine.
Yeah.
Talk about some music
and a bunch of fun stuff. So please like and subscribe for more. So now I think we should just start off with, now that we've discussed kind of what the podcast is going to be about, I think we should kind of just start off with our relationship, kind of stemming off the introductions that we just had. This might not be the most interesting, but,
Good to set the table of who we are and why we're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. First episode type of stuff.
Mhm.
Pilot episode. So, generally, I think that we have a good relationship.
Some days.
Yeah, some days. Some days more than others. But yeah, I mean, we have a pretty healthy father-son relationship. He would drive me to, all my sports events when I was younger. I would go to all of his music events, his gigs, where he would play drums, like you said, drummer. And that was really fun. I'd say I was kind of a difficult son at times, but
No, you're pretty easy actually.
well,
You had a lot of energy, but you're pretty easy. You're a good kid. So
maybe mom would disagree with you, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then what else is there? Went to college, like normal high school where we lived. And yeah, I would say you were not a strict parent, but you were definitely firm. So I don't know if that gives any insight into my upbringing at all, but yeah, I kind of had a lot of freedom to do, what I wanted, but also,
some structure.
some structure for sure. My life was definitely guided for a while there with sports and school and stuff. Kept me very busy. Yeah, that's kind of my take on our relationship, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been there for me and when I needed you, and yeah, we're able to kind of keep it light and funny, but I'm also able to have serious discussions with you. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been through some different life stuff, so I'd like to share that with you. Always been pretty open with you, I think. I don't think mom and I really treated you too much like a child. You were, as an only child, we're kind of a threesome. So yeah, I think it's good and it's changing. Obviously, last handful of years, you're an adult and doing adult things and having your own opinions and things, and that's good and healthy. And so it's more, shifting. I'll always be dad, but shifting to sort of, friend as well. So
yeah, this is the father and son opinion podcast. So we're going to be sharing our opinions a lot.
So yeah, you wanted to talk a little bit about I'm Gen X, you're Gen Z, and so we've been discussing this a lot lately, which is one of the reasons we wanted to do the podcast is to get other people's opinions, sort of the different worldviews of Gen X versus Gen Z and Boomers too. And they're a different view on all things. There's lots of, I think, preconceptions out there.
Yeah.
Some of which are true, some of which aren't, naturally.
Yeah, we were going to start by debunking some of the stereotypes. And this is kind of just, I did a quick Google search and found some of the, most common stereotypes associated with, kind of accusatory stereotypes. These are kind of some of the things I found. Some of them I, kind of already knew because people talk about it a lot and there's like memes on it and stuff like that. So,
Sure.
But Gen Z, some of the stereotypes here we have are that Gen Z tends to be lazy, mostly in terms of like career stuff, and then a little bit sensitive and addicted to technology is the big one. People think that Gen Zers are kind of like glued to their phones, and to some degree that's true. But the kind of debunking aspect here is that in reality, I think a lot of Gen Zers are, as a Gen Zer myself, are forward-thinking, more kind of know their value as opposed to, being not being like lazy, but they just know their value. So in terms of career, like, they may decline taking a job over, working somewhere that's not going to benefit their career or,
Sure.
improve their self-worth, there's, how they view themselves. So,
Right.
and then also, the job market is much more competitive now. So, that would be an argument against that Gen Zers are lazy, is that, you're pretty much required to have a degree now for every job. And, it's just much more competitive than it used to be. The living wage is much higher than it used to be, especially here in California. So, not all jobs are, have a living wage. So, those are some of the kind of counter arguments to those.
Yeah, it's actually something your mom and I talk about quite a bit. Is as you're growing up, it's like, how the heck are you going to afford living in Southern California? It's just so expensive here, and I don't think it's just Southern California. It's probably lots of places like that. How do you afford that kind of thing? And I think it's healthy too that you guys, Gen Zers, sort of have a better idea of what you want, or maybe what you don't want.
Yeah.
Gen Xers, I'd say it's probably very similar, right? So I think it's boomers thought similarly of us Gen Xers, that were kind of, because we were brought up more by sort of in the Dr. Spock child rearing model, where we're have to sort of make our own choices and sort of more free and potentially less discipline, depending on what we're talking in broad generalities, because there's lots of different flavors within Gen X and Gen Z and boomers.
Absolutely.
But it's, so I think this is also, some of it is generational, but you guys are brought up with technology that we didn't have growing up, the internet and all this Google and stuff. You can pretty much have an entire world's library. Back in the day, we talked about the Dewey Decimal System and going to a library to do research. It was just a completely different universe today, where you can literally in seconds, we both can look something up. If we're talking about some subject, we can look it up and look at experts immediately and get some differing opinions and come up with some quick facts, where it took a lot longer growing up.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I definitely say that's some of those commonalities there. I messed this up. All right, there we go. Yeah, there's definitely some commonalities between Gen Z and Gen X, particularly in terms of like discipline and stuff like that. And, kind of that perception that, they were coddled,
yeah,
which, I don't think is necessarily true. I think there are different, like struggles that each generation has had to go through. Like with my generation, probably COVID is a significant one.
sure.
That, changes everyone, and, not just Gen Z or Gen X. It changes, all the generations, millennials and boomers.
Let me ask you a question. So with Gen Z, where my life was not structured at all, right? It's like you go to school, you come home. I was a latchkey kid. I went out and did whatever I felt like doing until it was dinner time, with the exception of homework. Your life was much more structured.
Yes.
Would you say that's true of your whole generation, Gen Z, that there's more sort of helicopter parenting going on there than?
I'd say there's more, but I'd also say that there's like a fair amount of people who kind of have not quite as structured of a childhood, but I would say that it's not quite as nonchalant as it used to be. So like parents aren't going to be like, oh yeah, just like come home whenever, or like, you can walk to school, and like some parents will be like that, but I think there's definitely more of an emphasis on safety now, for for my childhood at least.
Yeah.
Like parents were not okay with people going out like past a certain hour, and like you always had curfew and stuff like that. So I think that has changed pretty significantly, and I think the sort of like, if you're talking about structure in terms of like extracurricular activities, maybe that hasn't changed like super significantly, but I think definitely like the hands-on parenting style has become more popular, and I'd say that's more,
Definitely true of us. We're definitely more hands-on and involved, and your life was way more structured. Some of it because you had so much energy, but I just think generationally the pendulum swung, right. So
yeah,
I think your mom and I had fairly unstructured childhoods for the most part,
yeah,
and yours was very structured.
yeah, yeah.
So I wonder if that's just the generations or just our is it just a Southern California thing? I think it's,
No, I don't think it's necessarily a Southern California thing. I think it is different, like very different, across the United States in general. But
right. So you're being brought up in Iowa. Maybe things are a little different than Southern
yeah,
California from a parenting perspective.
yeah. Well, I think if anyone who grew up in the suburbs or the city kind
Yeah.
of shares that same experience that maybe I had, but yeah, if you live somewhere more remote, I would say it's different. But in general, yeah, I think most of my generation had more of a hands-on childhood as opposed to maybe like yours. It's just there's more of a focus, especially with the age of internet. There's more of a focus on dangers and people who could do you harm and stuff like that. Like when I was a kid, I always heard of the ice cream truck thing. It was always a joke,
Yeah.
like don't get
I guess we
anyone's
just
car.
weren't that aware of that stuff when I was a kid. It probably was happening. It's just we weren't as aware of it.
Yeah, that's a huge difference too with my generation is
You're
we
aware
have
of
this
it. Yeah.
hyper awareness to
Yeah, yeah.
like
Gun
what could
violence
happen,
and-
gun
yeah,
violence
yeah.
especially, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, another thing that we were talking about here that I wanted to mention before we kind of get into the stereotypes of Gen X is one of the things that people accuse Gen X of, or the stereotypes kind of associated with Gen X, is a lack of kind of understanding modern movements, like like just change in general, like things happening in the world, and kind of like people, marching for change and stuff like that. I think that's one of the things that, maybe is like not understood about Gen X, because Gen X also had like, marches for civil rights and stuff like that. And, I think the kind of loss of communication there happens when, Gen Xers maybe don't understand the amount of movements and changes that Gen Z is kind of enacting and making right now. But
Yeah, you're. I would say, at least from my perspective, we took for granted a lot of the boomers' work and earlier, as it relates to some issues,
yeah,
and that we had a period of not. I mean, there were big things and definitely wars and things that happened that were
yeah,
charged. But I think your generation has seen a lot of change,
yeah.
especially lately.
It seems like my generation is like the generation of change, millennials too. But yeah, I mean, everyone in my generation, it seems is very accustomed to change at this point, and has had to kind of grow up. I think just growing up in Gen Z and even as a millennial is extremely different from Gen X childhoods, because the internet, I think, changed everything. Like you had, like I said, a hyper awareness to all these problems that maybe Gen Xers, because the lack of the internet, may not have understood or even known about.
Right.
It's like it's almost like Gen Z and millennials kind of grew up maybe a little faster because of that access to information in different ways, because there's, I'm sure Gen Xers, like there's a different way that they maybe had to grow up faster, but with the amount of knowledge, like information that's kind of thrown at Gen Zers, I think intellectually it requires you to grow up a lot faster and kind of understand yourself a lot more, especially in the age of mental health stuff going on. So, yeah.
Do you think part of it is we didn't filter enough of that information? Like, did your generation get too much information too quickly?
Yeah, but I mean, there's an argument against filtering that information and for
Right.
filtering that information, you know? It's like with anything. So, you know, if they had filtered all that information that my generation had gotten, you know, there would be an argument like, well, are we teaching them everything they need to know? Is there, you know, information that it's important for them to know? Like, I know the school system doesn't necessarily, it's like the argument with the school system. They're not necessarily teaching us everything we need to know
Right.
that's important for us to know, you know, in terms of history and just things that you can use in your career. So, yeah, it's like filtering that information would have its benefits, and also it's like, but also it's kind of just like being blissfully ignorant in a way, you know, because all that information is out there, and it's like, are you going to ignore that, or are you going to address it and talk about it? And you know, it's like a blessing and a curse, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. But do you want to give your take on kind of the stereotypes of Gen X that we had written down here?
Well, you know,
I mean, you can
this-
disagree with them too if you feel free to. These are just some things I found on the internet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
typical stereotypes.
yeah, you know, I think some of these things are you know, these are things that probably boomers would say about us, or, you know, maybe
Yeah.
Gen Z would say about us. But I think it's fairly true of most generational changes. You know, they ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're brought up in a different time. Like I said, we were brought up in a time when, you know, I was a latchkey kid, came home, had a lot of unstructured time, and had some structured things, but it was really more for me to divine what it is we wanted to do. And you know, your generation was sort of the complete opposite of that, almost, it seems to me, where like every moment of your life was very structured.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the way it goes, because in speaking with my brothers, who are, you know, I guess technically boomers,
Yeah.
you know, their life was very structured.
Yeah. Have you heard the saying "Okay, Boomer"?
No, what's that mean?
It's like it's kind of turned into a meme too. But when someone says "Okay, Boomer," it's like kind of like writing them off because they're a boomer.
Oh.
Like, you know, like they don't understand.
Right.
I'm probably butchering that explanation. I've kind of fallen out of touch with like meme culture and stuff like that over the past.
Maybe
few
that's not
years,
such a
but-
terrible thing.
Well, I mean, it's useful to know. It's funny. There's like funny stuff out there. It's about like filtering through the funny memes and the,
Right.
you know, stuff that's like meh.
But, you know, in terms of, you know, Gen Z, Gen X boomers, we're, you know, still finding our way. This is a fairly dynamic time in terms of all the social changes and things, and,
Yeah.
you know, what's socially acceptable and what isn't. I mean, certainly when, again, generationally, things that were acceptable to boomers weren't necessarily acceptable to Gen Xers, and same thing with Gen Z. So it's and millennials. So it's each successive generation has their things that are acceptable, not acceptable. And I know there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of the TV shows I like to watch, and, you know, YouTube podcasts also talk about, you know, sort of, you know, sensitivities and,
Yeah.
you know, where's the sweet spot between being sensitive to, you know, other people and their, you know, their life experience and yours.
Yeah.
And when is it just overkill? When is it, you know, like we've talked about quite a bit, you know, this whole sort of, you know, whether it's George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, and they held slaves, so they're immediately written off. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, you can appreciate people in history or even today for their accomplishments, but they don't need to be perfect for you
Yeah.
to appreciate that part of them, but you need
Yeah.
to be clear-eyed in terms of
Yeah. Or even a good person. They don't even
Yeah.
have to be a good person. It's just
Right.
you have to understand.
right.
So, and that's an argument kind of my generation would probably make, is that, you know, to recognize what these people did is perfectly fine, but you also need to understand, like, that they weren't perfect, you know,
Sure.
because there's an idolization of people, you know, that weren't exactly perfect, that, you know, and nobody's perfect, but
Well, and the other thing is nobody's perfect, but
nobody's perfect except Jill or mom.
nice one. But the other thing is it's you know they're just like we're products of the periods we were brought up.
Yeah.
They were products of the environment they were brought up. So
Yeah.
you know, this whole idea of you know, whether it's people today or people in history, to sort of apply today's standards to their life.
Yeah.
I,
But I mean,
definitely want to be honest about the good things and bad things,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean, you know, you have to appreciate the time in which they were brought up, whether it's, you know, somebody who's 90 years old and doing their thing, and or some, you know, Thomas Jefferson, you know,
Yeah.
you need to appreciate how they're brought up in their circumstance, and not sort of try to put our worldview today on
yeah.
their thing.
Well, it's
you know?
also important because, you know, things were like obviously things were different societally back
Yeah.
then, and you know modern standards were not in place. But also that doesn't make it any less wrong, you know, to
Sure.
be a slave owner.
Yeah, as
So
an example. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. That's you know that's important to think about. Like
exactly right.
just because it shouldn't be an excuse. You know what I mean? Like their society was different back then and stuff like that. But that's not an excuse that like slavery was bad. You know. And that's important to distinguish too. Like,
Sure.
it was different, but you know, slavery is still bad. You know,
For sure.
yeah. So I didn't realize that you came like ready to go. Like your shirt, you look so professional.
Thank you.
Came ready to dish it out.
Absolutely. You obviously came ready to dish it
Yeah.
out as well.
Well, less work, more play.
Is that it?
You know,
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm all about the work.
I'm all about working smarter, not harder.
Uh,
Yeah. Lazy. Gen Z lazy. Exactly. Exactly what we were talking about earlier. So we were just going to finish up this segment by talking a little bit more about Gen X, the stereotypes.
right. So, you know, compared to the boomers, who were, as I said, my older brothers sort of fall into that category. So,
Yeah.
you know, some of the assumptions out there that were always right, privileged by the world that the boomers created,
Yeah.
were stubborn, and maybe are a little less understanding of current movements.
Yeah. Which you talked about.
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit, but you know, I think as with all things, some of it's true and some of it isn't. You know, I think
Yeah.
you know, as I said, boomers, at least from my experience, did grow up in a different world, sort of more structured, more you know, different expectations on them
Yeah.
than our generation. Not that there weren't expectations on our generation; it's just different.
Yeah.
And you know, and I, you know, definitely, as with most generations, and I think this is true not just of boomers but of all generations, they felt, you know, we had it really hard, and you guys had this cushy life, and
Yeah.
so I think that's true of each succeeding generation.
Yeah.
That they have that feeling that, boy, that the previous generation had a cakewalk, and we paved the way, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so
That's definitely probably a boomer boomers' take on Gen X is like, you kind of had it easy kind of deal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same way they think about, every following generation is, same. And then the older, the other generations kind of stack on and they're like, this newer, younger generation, they're so soft,
Yes.
kind of deal. But
Yeah.
I thought it was surprising that you thought it was a stretch to say that every Gen Xer is stubborn, because I thought that every single Gen Xer was stubborn and always thought they were right.
Really? That's what you think,
That's I'm kidding.
Well,
I'm
it's
just-
been nice talking to you.
Yeah, I'm just taking
The shortest podcast in human
Yeah.
history.
I'm just taking shots at everyone. So
Oh, is that a way?
yeah, everybody can come for me.
No, I think that's too broad a stroke to paint. I think
I was
we're as stubborn
completely
as
joking.
anybody, but
Yeah, I was completely joking, but yeah, I think everybody's stubborn when it comes to like talking about the new generations, though. Like, and their view kind of on the world,
yeah,
and particularly like change. So, they're stubborn on like, you hear the phrase "stuck in their ways," right?
yep,
A lot, and I think that kind of reigns true in every generation past, and I'm sure like there will be Gen Zers who when the next generation comes will be stuck
sure.
in their ways too.
yep.
But
Well, it comes from experience, right? You have a certain set of experience, world experience, life experience, and that leads you to certain ideas.
yeah,
And some of them are right, and some of them are dead wrong. Change is hard. So I think,
Yeah.
regardless of where you fall, I think change is hard, and when you're in a time where there's a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty, it's more complex. You sort of cling to those old ideas that you
yeah.
had.
Well, it's safe. Change is scary.
Yeah.
I think people, that's a big reason why people cling to their old ways and prefer, don't like change, is because it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. I completely understand
But
that.
change is the one constant in the universe, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're always going to have change. You're always going to have to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Unfortunately for all
You
those
guys
people.
more than most. I mean, I think that's one of the things. I remember having this conversation with you about. You're the one thing you need to learn through school is learn how to learn, because you will, for the rest of your life, be learning new skills, because things are changing so dramatically.
Yeah.
That are sort of gone are the days, at least from my experience, where you can have the same job or career for your whole life. It's just
Yeah, of course.
life is so much more dynamic than it used to be.
Yeah. That's what, people in my generation stay at a job for, like a year and then they're on to the next.
We have to.
Which-
One thing you have to be careful of is you need to be at a job, and I'm not one to talk, but you have to be at a job long enough where you pick up the right skills.
Yeah, well, I think that, of
Yeah.
course that's important.
Yeah.
Staying at a job long enough to where you actually learn something and gain,
Mm-hmm.
the experience.
All right. Jill's a
You
good
know.
example of this.
Yeah, my girlfriend. Yeah,
She's learned a ton.
yeah,
It's hard work.
exactly. She's working for the state parks right now, and it's because we live out basically in the desert. So the summers here are really rough. So that's been a great struggle for her. But I definitely think she'll be, come out on the other end,
Great.
and have benefited greatly, from that. But yeah. Anyway,
Should we talk about our next episodes and give a little preview?
yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do next episode. We were going to talk a little bit about what's going on right now with that I've actually experienced a little bit, is the Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg. That whole debate. If you don't know, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, his company, just started a new app or social media platform called Threads that is literally like it's very similar to Twitter. Very similar to Twitter, we'll just say. And Elon Musk has threatened to sue. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting, and we'll be talking about that next episode.
That sounds good.
On top of that, we plan on having our first sports segment. We'll be talking a little bit about NFL stuff and the lead up to training camp, because we're almost there. We're about a month away, I think, from training camp starting up,
Yeah.
NFL season.
Always an exciting time of year for those of you who are NFL fans. This is the time where every team is going to make the Super Bowl and putting together the right players to make that happen. So really looking forward to covering some of our favorite teams, of which there are more than one.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you're super knowledgeable about all the different players around the league.
Yeah.
Super excited to see where our teams will end up.
Yeah. And we can also talk a little bit about NHL stuff. I'm not sure if we'll talk about it so much next week, but or next episode, but we'll definitely talk about that in the future. And then
We should probably cover the draft, the NHL draft, and how different teams did. But
yeah, we could definitely cover that because there were some surprise picks, I think.
For sure.
I mean, at least our team had a surprise pick, but
Yeah.
So
One of them,
we'll definitely talk about that, and other than that, we will be talking about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So AI, if you don't know, ChatGPT is a new AI kind of software that is made to replicate human conversation. So things
Making this just not matter.
yeah, exactly, making this not matter.
They can write
AI
our script for us.
Yeah, exactly. Some AI, we're hiring this AI bot, and it's going to be writing all of our scripts from now on. So all this human error you've been experiencing
Will go
these
away.
last 30 minutes
Be
will go
perfect.
away. Yeah, it'll be a perfect podcast.
Be like Shakespeare.
Exactly. We'll have ChatGPT write our podcast script in Shakespearean style.
Edgar Allan Poe, in the style of Edgar Allan Poe.
It'll be from now on the podcast is going
Cry
to
the
be really
Raven
really
Nevermore.
dark. Really dark podcast from here on out. But we'll just dive a little bit into AI and how that might affect jobs in the future, and you
Certainly
know,
my industry in biotech.
Yeah.
Affecting it a lot.
yeah, and schools, like students using it to write essays for them in school.
Cool. Well, we look forward to that.
Yeah, we'll touch on that a bit. Anything you'd like to add before we dip out for the week?
No, thanks so much for those of you who sat through this episode. Hopefully this is interesting, and please like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe, and also watch Shrinking if you have Apple
excellent.
TV Plus.
Yeah.
It's really funny and really cool, and I think a lot of you will enjoy it.
Very good.
Yeah, is there any other shows you want to shout out? Anything you want to shout out?
No, that was a good one.
That was a good
Yeah.
one. What's the show Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, of
Yeah, of
course.
course, Ted Lasso. If you have not seen Ted Lasso, you need to get on Apple TV and you need to watch it, because it is
so funny.
it's so funny and it's such a feel-good show.
And Shrinking is very similar.
Yeah,
Harrison Ford is fantastic in it.
they're both feel-good shows, and after these last few years, I think we all need some feel-good shows.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think that's about it for us.
Yeah.
So, this has been the first episode of the Father and Son podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.